A devotional for Friday, August 7th, 2020, written by Dr. Colin Wilson, titled, A Time for Honest Complaints. Atheist turned believer C.S. Lewis left us with these words. We are not necessarily doubting that God will do the best for us. We are wondering how painful the best will turn out to be. Quite a statement of truth, isn't it? Definitely something worth reflecting on. Have you ever complained to God? Did you feel guilty for doing so? For some people, especially those who profess to be followers of Jesus, the thought of complaining to God is blasphemous. After all, good Christians are supposed to pray and trust God, trust His sovereignty, see our struggles as His will as He continues to work out His purpose in our lives. There is some truth to that. We serve a God who reveals Himself as all-knowing, omniscient, all-powerful, almighty, and who emphatically declares, I am the first and the last, and beside me there is no God. Isaiah 44, verse 6. Someone that powerful ought to be trusted. Sometimes, however, it is not that easy. These thoughts and others came to mind as I reread parts of Dave Shive's excellent book, Night Shift, God's Work in the Dark Hours of Life. A book written for Christians who perceive that God has lost track of them in the darkness. Shive writes, perhaps he is distracted, confused, or indifferent to their plight as they bumble about on the night shift. Puzzled by contradictions between their hopeful expectations and the reality of their Christian experience, they are in the dark, seemingly forgotten by God. Page 25. The night shift, those seasons of life when it seems and feels like we are all alone, are not that unusual. Even Jesus had a moment when He cried out on the cross, my God, why have you forsaken me? As recorded in Matthew 27, verse 46. Words first spoken by the psalmist as he wrestled with the silence of God in Psalm 22, verse 1. Yes, there are times when complaining seems permissible. In a portion of the book in which I noted as profound in my margin, page 80, the author wrote that as he reflected on Psalm 40, he was astonished to discover that more than 15% of the contents of the psalm can be construed as complaints. A rather high percentage for a section of the Bible we generally view as emphasizing praise and worship. He continued, biblical worship is most glorifying to God and meaningful to us when it affirms the authenticity of our hardship and extols the magnificence of our Savior, who was despised and forsaken of men, a man of sorrows and acquainted with grief. Isaiah 53, verse 3. If God is acquainted with grief, including ours, why then are we so reluctant to talk to Him about it? Perhaps, as Shive noted, we don't sing about the darkness and about God forgetting us because it doesn't suit our theology, our emotions, or our preferences. Page 81. It is true that we are not comfortable talking to God as the psalmist did in Psalm 40. Yet there is something powerfully liberating about having honest conversations with God that reflect how we truly feel. What good of a relationship is it if we cannot bear our souls? If we always have to pretend we live on mountaintops with no idea of what being in a valley looks and feels like? I agree with Shive that if our worship is to be authentic biblical adoration, it should include complaint and honest dialogue with God. Page 81. Our brokenness, a priceless commodity in the economy of God, is the accepted legal tender of the night shift. page 78. In fact, the psalmist discovered that the Lord inclined unto me and heard my cry. Psalm 40, verse 1. In other words, God is okay with our honest complaints, and he is not turned off by it. As a valley walker, that encourages me. It should encourage you too.